Matilda and Hein are a middle-aged couple with no children and own a pig farm on the outskirts of Endorema. Hein woke up every day at 3 a.m. to let out the pigs, feed them, clean their pens, and go to the market. Matilda, his wife, ran the household, and once she was done, she would join Hein outside and help with the farm. She would climb on the tractor and turn the land. She would chop up vegetables and stale meat and feed it to the pigs. At night, when all the work was done, Hein and Matilda would head back to the farmhouse to have dinner and prepare for bed. The farmhouse wasn't far from the pig pen. Friday mornings, Hein would take his truck to the pig pen, load the pigs, and drive off to the abattoir. They made good money, enough to keep the farm going. One Friday, while Hein was gone, Matilda finished up her household chores and headed to the land. She climbed the tractor and plowed the fields. Then she began chopping the veggies as normal and chopped some meat and took it to the pig pen. She noticed that the pigs were unsettled. They seemed agitated for some reason. She entered the pen with caution, noticing the unusual behavior of the pigs. There was definite tension, as if an unseen force had gotten hold of them. As Matilda approached, she noticed a rusty piece of metal protruding from the side of the pen. The pigs, in their restlessness, had kicked up some debris, exposing the sharp edge. Trying to investigate, Matilda reached down to inspect the metal, and as she did, one of the pigs pushed her with its snout, sending crashing into the metal edge and sending a searing pain through her leg. She recoiled, grabbing her scratched calf. Wincing, Matilda examined the wound. The scratch seemed minor, but there was an odd tingling sensation that made her uneasy. She ignored it, attributing it to the rust on the metal. Little did she know that this seemingly innocent scratch would set off a chain of events that would plunge their peaceful farm life into a nightmare. Days passed, and Matilda's scratch started to fester. At first, it was just a nagging discomfort, but soon she developed a fever, and her condition worsened rapidly. Concerned, Hein abandoned his usual routine on the farm to care for his wife. The pigs were now left unattended and grew increasingly hungry. The once well-maintained farm began to show signs of neglect. As Matilda's illness intensified, Hein's attention was consumed by her deteriorating health. The pigs, desperate for food, resorted to scavenging the farm for anything edible. They were left to roam the farm unattended. However, their hunger led them to consume not just scraps, but also toxic substances they found at the far end of the farm. These toxic substances had triggered a bizarre mutation. Day by day, more pigs would mutate to a point that all the pigs were fully mutated. That night, they jumped the fence and headed for town. They took over the sidewalks and empty streets in search of food. They made weird squealing, grunting noises. The townsfolk were jolted awake by strange noises coming from the streets. Giant shadows moved across the sidewalks and streets as mutated pigs moved between the houses. With unnaturally large upper bodies and shorter legs, yellow eyes and long, sharp teeth, they let out loud, guttural screeches as they scavenged for food. Panic spread through Endorema as these grotesque creatures wreaked havoc in their insatiable hunger. Some townsfolk turned on their floodlights to see what was happening outside. This attracted the mutants, and they rushed to the doors of the lit-up houses, banging with their bodies to try and break down the doors. They could smell the food inside. Humans! Squealing and grunting, they pushed and beat with their hooves on windows. The humans screamed and ran for cover. Realizing that they couldn't break the doors, they would reach up with their arms or claws to the gutters and try to pull themselves onto the rooftops of the houses. Their weight was too much for the gutters, and the mutants would fall to the ground. This frustrated them. Things suddenly went quiet, and the townspeople stood by their windows, watching. Since it was weekend, many of the teenagers had gone to dinner or movies or just a walk around town, unaware of the dangers. A boy walking the sidewalk was savagely attacked and torn apart by the mutant pigs. With each feed, they would mutate further. Those who didn't feed as much took longer to mutate. Each mutant looked different to the other. The pigs found their way into a shopping mall where hundreds of children and teenagers were hanging out. A bloodbath unfolded. Limbs lay strewn. Blood covered a huge section of the mall floors and shop windows. Hein, torn between caring for Matilda and saving the town from the monstrous pigs, found himself trapped in a nightmarish dilemma. He had no choice. He had to leave Matilda to go into town. Hein phoned the police and, as quickly as he could, he explained what had happened on the farm and how the pigs mutated and are now terrorizing the townsfolk. Hein jumped in his truck and sped to town as fast as he could. The town was quiet, although there were some houses with shattered glass and some blood on the sidewalks. A half-eaten human was lying in the street. Not sure where to start looking, he followed the trail of broken glass, blood drops and slimy goo which led him to the mall. He drew his handgun as he climbed onto the escalators. The horror that greeted him was too much for his stomach, and he emptied it right there on the escalator. Children were running the escalators 3 steps at a time until they were all outside. The police joined Hein a few minutes later, guns drawn. Some cops had hand grenades that they threw into the horde of pigs, blasting them to pieces. As the massive body of a mutant jumped through the air to land on Hein, he pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the pig dead center between the eyes. It fell with a mighty thud. Hearing the commotion, the other mutants turned their heads and ran straight for Hein and the police. More hand grenades and gunfire echoed through the mall. Pieces of meat stuck to the mall ceiling, blood on the shop windows, and a mountain of dead pigs lying all over the mall. Hein slowly got up from the stairs, his arm bleeding as he hit the escalator. He walked towards the police. The nightmare was over. The police locked the mall until forensics could come and take samples for testing. Hein returned home to find Matilda had succumbed to her fever and complications. He was never the same again. The once thriving farm had become a breeding ground for horror, and the consequences of a simple scratch would prove to be far more terrifying than anyone in Endorema could have imagined.